This is the 13th Red Cedar Conference. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you coming out and spending some time with us today. As you probably saw, there's food out in the hallway if you're looking for some morning snacks and coffee and some orange juice and stuff there as well. My name is Dan Zur. I'm a regional natural resource educator with University of Wisconsin Division of Extension. I'm based in Eau Claire, but I work in the northwest part of the state in general. And I am the conference chair this year for the first year. And for all of the years previous, Dick Lamers, who many of you know, was either the conference chair or the conference co-chair. And Dick, if you could come up here for a minute, we want to acknowledge you a little bit. Come on. How about a hand for Dick? So way back in 2011, Dick put together an event that was held over at the Mabel Tainter. What was the name of that? You remember? Was it Celebrate the River? I can't remember what the name of that was.
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah. And after that was in 2011. And after that, Dick and myself and Paula Liberty from DNR was here, and Buzz Sorge and some county folks started kind of all talking about maybe we should do some kind of big event annually. And we all came together, and at that time, the Tainter-Monoman Lake Association that Dick was president of, Ron Verdon was the vice president, kind of took the lead and started putting this thing together, and here we are 13 years later. And Dick, we just wanted to say thank you so much for all of your time and effort in making this conference what it is today and what it has been. So that's something that he can go take home and use as a paperweight or to clobber criminals over the head when they break into his house, whatever he wants to use it for. But there's also a $50 gift certificate to Nonic Brewery, which we know Dick will appreciate that one. So Dick, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
Yep. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for all of the efforts that Dick has put forth over the last 13 years. So I want to thank Dick and the rest, and Dick's still on the planning committee. He just decided to step down as from the leadership role this year. So he's still involved and very much responsible for getting a lot of the stuff done that goes into this whole event. And the rest of the planning committee is around the room as well. I'm not going to introduce everybody because I'll forget names, but look for the blue shirts. There's a few of them down here, some folks back there. So all those folks are on the planning committee for the conference and put a lot of effort and work into making this day happen. Thanks to our sponsors who are listed in your program. One of the reasons why we can do this conference for the low price of $35, which, believe me, I go to a lot of conferences. There aren't very many of them that'll charge you $35 for a full day anymore. So it's pretty nice that we're able to do that, and part of the reason for that is because we have so many great sponsors. So thanks to those sponsors for helping make this happen as well. Thanks to the exhibitors who have shown up today. Some around here, and there's some out in the hall. Please stop by those exhibitor booths as the day progresses. And also, there's a little sheet of paper in your program. If you did not see it, hopefully I can maybe dig it out here. Looks like this. It's an exhibitor bingo card. So we take that around to the various exhibitors and get them to sign off on their little square on the bingo card, and you can turn that in out at the front desk and win some fabulous prizes that we'll give away a little bit later on in the day. So do that if you are so inclined. Also, do this even if you're not inclined. We have evaluation sheets in the program. These are very, very important for us as a planning committee. Each year we look at these and figure out what people enjoyed, what they didn't enjoy, what they want to see more of, those kinds of things. And this helps us for next year's planning an awful lot. So please make sure you fill that out at the end of the day. And room moderators, anybody that's moderating a room, please remind your folks in the various rooms that you're in to fill out those evaluation forms when they can. If you've glanced at the program, you might have known that things are going to be just a little bit different this year, and I want to talk about that for just a few minutes. Last year, we decided to do an afternoon session that maybe some of you attended that John Strasser, who's here again this year, kind of facilitated. It was basically kind of a visioning session where we asked folks to kind of imagine what they want to see in the Red Cedar River watershed and how they envisioned what this community would look like in the future. And we got really, really good feedback, speaking of evaluation forums, we got really good feedback about that and decided that what we wanted to do this year was expand that a little bit. So the afternoon sessions on the program this afternoon will be dedicated to that. And there's 5 topic areas. John will be talking about that a little bit later. If you're struggling which one you want to go to, maybe John can help clear that up for you a little bit on what ones might be more interesting to you. But we really want to get your feedback. So often, those of us that work professionally in natural resources and for local and regional government agencies, we think we know everything, right? Oh yeah, we know what we got to do. But many times we learn a lot from folks in the community, and we want to take that opportunity and give you that opportunity to learn more about what you're thinking about the aspects of living in a watershed community and what that means for you and how you can fit in to maybe some of the water quality goals and practices that we need to start installing, continue installing. There's certainly some going on already. But what's your role in there? Where do you fit in there? So we want to learn some of that stuff from you and get you thinking about those kinds of things. So that's kind of what the afternoon session is going to be about. The afternoon sessions, there's going to be 5 of them. So a few more. Normally we only have about 3 rooms to go to, so this afternoon there's going to be 5 rooms. You're going to have to learn your geography a little bit better with the union and find out where you need to be. But so yeah, please, and let us know, anybody on the planning committee, let us know if you have questions in the interim, and we'll see if we can answer them for you. So I don't think I had much of anything else to talk about, so I guess we'll introduce Jeremy. So the first speaker this morning is Jeremy Solin, who is, there's a bio in the program. Jeremy has served extension in a lot of different ways over the years, and is a very, very knowledgeable and wonderful person to be around. One of the things that I always remember with Jeremy is I don't remember where we were at, but we had an in-service, and you came along, and we did a forest walk, and the guy was an encyclopedia. It was like, oh yeah, there's no leaves on the trees right now, but I can tell those 2 different, and then, oh, there's some good mushrooms. Oh, there's some bad mushrooms. Just a fun guy to go hiking in the forest with. And Jeremy has also done, now he's was it assistant dean for the southern Wisconsin. So he's the assistant dean of extension for the southern part of the state. We'll allow him up north for this event. And Jeremy's also done a lot of work in the field of systems thinking. And really, he'll tell you more about that, but it really plays into what we're trying to do with some of the sessions that we have today, have going on today, where we want you to think of what's going on in this watershed and how we all interact and how all the decisions that people make on how they manage their land and how they live in this watershed are very, very much interconnected. And he'll tell you a little bit more about that. So without further ado, Jeremy Solin. Thanks.
Let's see. Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to your watershed, to the Red Cedar watershed. You're here because you have a passion for the place you live in, and I appreciate that. So thank you for being here. One of the things that Dan didn't say about me is I think I have to do a little bit more research on this, but I think I hold the record for number of positions that any one person has had in extension, somewhere around 10 or 12 or something like that. So I floated around a lot. I prefer to think that that's maybe a good thing because people want to be, but there might be an alternative story to that too, but who knows. So before we get started, I wanted to maybe make a little distinction about being a keynote, which is a term I'm not super comfortable with, but maybe distinguish what today will be like from what you expect from most keynotes. Dan mentioned the conference overall is going to be a little bit different than it has been in the past, and this keynote will probably be a little bit different than what you expect of a keynote. So first of all, most keynotes I think we think of as kind of inspirational. It probably won't be that inspirational. I think of it more as kind of more practical and maybe aspirational of something that we can work towards. That said, there might be a few people that get really excited about systems thinking. And if you do, I'm happy to welcome you into the systems thinking nerd club. There's not a whole lot of us, but happy to have a few more. So if you get super excited about this, I'll be happy to have you join in. The other part of this keynote that'll be a little bit different is most times keynotes kind of talk at you the full time. I'm going to talk at you a little bit, but we're actually going to do some activities, which is why you have paper and pens and markers. I thought maybe there'd be some crayons, but we'll stick with the markers. So we'll be doing some activities to actually apply systems thinking. The general idea of this is that we'll introduce systems thinking this morning, be something you'll carry with you through the rest of the day, and then particularly this afternoon as you get into those sessions, you'll be able to hopefully pull out some of these idea and kind of concepts that I'll talk about, and use them to explore those topics in maybe a little bit different way and think about them in a little bit different way. So that's going to be the keynote. So I'm going to do three things. I want to give you a little bit background kind of on how I came to focus on systems thinking and the kind of importance that I feel it plays, both in my career but generally in the work we do. Then I'll do a little bit of background kind of theory, methods, nomenclature around systems thinking, and then we're actually going to apply that by doing some mapping. So that's the plan. And amazingly, all of the technology has been working, but that'll probably jinx it. So we'll see where things go here. So just a little bit about my path here. So grew up northern Wisconsin, grew up in Lang Lake County, basically in the woods. My dad and my uncle were loggers. Everything I could do outside I did, hunting, trapping, fishing, working in the woods, wandering. And so I've always had a really strong connection to nature, and always knew that I would work somewhere in that field. And one of the things that particularly informed kind of my path was, seeing things that I loved that were lost. So trout stream that I loved to fish in as a little kid. I remember a particular hole that I fished in, grassy bank, and then someone bought the land and mowed everything down. That spot to trout fish, wasn't any good anymore. So I started to kind of make some of those connections of the things that we do on the land have an impact beyond those direct things. Into college, mostly I went to college to play baseball, but once that didn't work out all that well, started to focus on what I was going to do, and went into water resources because of my love of fishing in particular, but generally water work, and in particular it was because I saw that connection between water and everything else that was going on kind of in the world, right? Particularly in the landscape, but more generally. And the opportunity for, kind of everybody recognizes the value of water at some level and connects to it. And so I saw that as a connection point to engage people in kind of protecting the places that we love. So pursued that path for a while, kind of technical skills. First round of grad school, I started working on the impacts of climate change on peatlands in northern Minnesota with this amazing ecologist, Dr. John Pastor. One of the things he did, probably maybe the most intimidating thing I've ever had to do, was he would give me a stack of journal articles, and then he said, come back next week and tell me all about those things and tell me what they did wrong and what was right, and we'd talk about those things. So I had to present to him on a weekly basis. So we did that ongoing for several months, and the realization that I had in there was, this was 1998. There was a lot of climate science already done at that point, and my realization was we didn't necessarily need more science to make changes in how we behaved. We just needed more engagement around that. And so from that point, I actually changed programs, went into the environmental education field where I've spent most of the rest of my time. And I did that because I was particularly interested in how do people use information and make decisions, and how do we potentially change people's behaviors. And as part of that, systems thinking became kind of a common theme in there of like we had to, understand connections between our behaviors and things that were happening. We had to broadly understand relationships between natural systems, social systems, all of those kind of things. So have been on that path for a while and was working in that field. Thought I generally understood systems from both the natural science side of things, ecology side of things, from a behavior standpoint. And then in 2015, I was introduced, 2014, introduced to a project called ThinkWater, which you see up here on the screen. And ThinkWater was a national project run through UW Extension, focused on integrating systems thinking into water education. And the piece that brought to my understanding was how we think, kind of the cognitive process, how we build information and or build knowledge, and in particular the importance of mental models, which is our kind of constructed knowledge in kind of filtering and understanding the world, right? So all of those pieces, there's a systems thinking thread in there in kind of different ways. So the sum of all of that for me is the knowledge that we have individually and collectively is incredibly important. It's the basis of our decisions. It's not the only thing that influences decisions, right? There's politics and there's power and there's psychological things. There's all kinds of things that play into decisions that we make. But the knowledge that we have is the core of that. I always like to say there's a reason we don't walk out in front of a moving bus. That's knowledge, right? We know what would happen if we walked out in front of a moving bus. Knowledge is the basis of our decision making. And it's one thing that we have kind of full control over, right? We can determine and develop our own understanding. We can help others kind of develop their own understanding of something, right? So it's under our control. So I think that's the core thread that's been kind of flowing through my career and has been a core part of what I've been trying to learn and hopefully what I'll share a little bit with you today. So that's that. So I want to get into background on systems thinking a little bit, but before I do that, I want to know a little bit of who's here. So to start with, how about any water body owners, lakeshore owners, shoreland owners, lake association members, lake district members? Okay, so I have a few of you folks, good. How about farmers? Good, excellent, thank you for being here. How about colleagues from universities, UW, other campuses, Extension, a few folks. Students, we've got quite a few students, which is awesome to see. Excellent, well, good deal. How about just general interested citizens involved in some way or another? All right. How about people who live in a watershed? Checking to make sure you're all awake. All right, that's good. On the right path so far. We all live in a watershed. And then final one, how about systems thinkers? How many of you identify as systems thinkers? All right, we got a few hands up there already. What I know about systems thinking is that you all are actually systems thinkers. You may not think of yourself that way. Hopefully by the end of today, all of you will raise your hand when we talk about systems thinking. But it's a skill and a knowledge set and a practice that you need to develop, but everybody can develop that, right? So my goal is, again, to kind of tap into your abilities there and give you some tools to to become a better systems thinker, potentially. All right, so into the background on systems thinking. So I like to think of kind of systems thinking, its usefulness in three ways. One is improve our own thinking, which is that part of like how do we use and tap into kind of our mental cognitive processes to think about things in new, interesting, more effective ways. So that's the thinking part. The second one is about improving our knowledge. So I'll talk about this distinction about the between knowledge and information and the relationship between thinking and knowledge, but they are separate things. But we can engage in systems thinking using tools of systems thinking to improve our own knowledge. And then I think the thing that's most important of all of this is using it to improve education and communication through building shared knowledge, basically, or shared mental models. And I'll talk about that mental models idea a little bit more. That, to me, is the core of our challenge, right? Is how do we build shared mental models, shared understanding that are good representations of reality. And I'll get into all those pieces. All right. So the first thing to start with, I'm going to kind of take us deep into a little tangent around thinking, and then bring this forward with some tools. So this question of what is a complex issue you're facing in your work, that's almost everything, right? There are very few very simple things in any of our work or in any of our lives. Unfortunately, we tend to hold mental models or approach things in a very linear way when in reality the world is not that, right? So we often work in this little box where we're proposing linear solutions, and then we step out into the real world and realize, oh, that doesn't really look like that. And so we're continuously challenged by the solutions that we propose because they don't match the complexity of the real world, which gets at this idea of, famously from Einstein, we can't solve the problems by using the same kind of thinking that we used when we created them. This is kind of a theme you'll see as we move through here. We have lots of challenges in the world. We've been trying to solve them for a long time, and I would say a lot of our challenges is just about how we think about them and how we propose solutions, right? We need to move past linear, simple solutions and into recognizing the complexity. The core of this is this idea of a mental model. So we all hold mental models. Turns out mental models are incredibly powerful, and they're incredibly useful, and they're incredibly dangerous. So the example I like to use is a dog. You all have a picture of a dog in your head. When I say dog, you completely understand what that is. When you go outside this afternoon or go home this afternoon and you see a four-legged furry beast walking by, you immediately know that that's a dog. You don't have to spend time figuring like, oh, look, it's got 4 legs and paws, and your brain's already got that figured out. As soon as you notice that thing, your brain says, dog. Don't have to think about it. That's the power of mental models, in that there is so much information in the world, our brain uses these shortcuts called mental models based on existing knowledge and experience to say, yep, I got that taken care of. I know what that is. I don't have to spend time thinking about it. The challenge is, the danger of it, which we'll spend a little time on, is that your brain automatically goes to what it knows. And so if there's some beast that's not a dog that your brain thinks is a dog, it's still going to tell you it's a dog. You're still going to think it's a dog, right? And so we get into situations where we kick out kind of the reality of the world because it doesn't fit our mental model. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. All right. So mental models are really powerful. This Jim Larson cartoon, you get the sense of that, right? First reaction, if you're flying an airplane, you see a goat, it's like, what the hell's that doing up in the sky? Maybe there's something else going on there. So this is our kind of conceptualization of a mental model and the real world. So a mental model, you'll see on the top there, mental model is an approximation of the real world. It's never actually the real world. You don't have the real world in your head. You have an approximation of it. That's your kind of knowledge base. I always say you don't have a dog in your head. You have a model of a dog in your head. You don't want a dog in your head, right? That'd be a problem. And all of the dogs would be a lot of a problem. So we build these mental models. We build them out of kind of testing out understanding of the world. And when we're kids, we are exceptionally good at this. Every day is like a whole new thing. We're continuously testing. Like, does this work? That's why we're sticking fingers in everything. We're tasting things. We're doing all kinds of things, right? This is a continuous process of, oh, this is how I think the world works. Let's try this out. Oh, not like that. That's a messed up mental model. Need to build a new one. That process on the bottom, what do we call that in kind of everyday language? Any ideas? I think I heard learning, right? Yeah, that's the process of learning, kind of having an idea of what works in the world, seeing, getting feedback from the real world, and then adjusting if needed, right? So my example of a dog, I'll stick with that one. When I was 3 years old, my mental model of a dog was that they were friendly, furry things that I could pet and wrestle with and do whatever. And then I found a dog that tore open my hand. I still have some scars of that. Realized my mental model wasn't all that great. Not all dogs were friendly, right? And so I built a new mental model of when they growl at you and bar their teeth, they're not actually that friendly, right? So that was feedback from the real world, and we continuously do this. The challenge we run into is we really love our mental models as we grow older. Because we've had all this experience, we've built all this knowledge, we get to the point where we feel like, yeah, I've figured out the world, like Dan said. I know what's going on and I know what needs to be done. In those situations, when we kind of, I'll just say, calcify those mental models, when we go out into the real world and information comes in, we tend to do two things. One of them is to say, yep, I already got that figured out. I understand that, fits into my mental model. Or two, nope, that's not true. Doesn't fit into my mental model, can't actually be true, right? And you can see how this plays out politically, all these kind of things. So the third option, which is the option that I would encourage us to have, is this sense of curiosity and continuous learning, right? Which is like, well, maybe I have a little humility and maybe my mental model isn't quite fully formed. It's still a representation of reality and I need to continue to build that, right? I need to be open to feedback, right? So that's the general concept of mental models. Right. And it's an iterative process. That's just what this shows of like, in a really good situation, we're continuously getting that feedback. And I would say from an education standpoint, helping others engage with their mental models, thinking about the kind of how well it represents reality. The other thing I'll say about this is like the scientific process, this is also like the scientific process, right? It's like test out a theory or a hypothesis, build a theory, continue to determine if that makes sense or not. And so this approach to like thinking is essentially that, like a continuous process of trying things out. All right, so here's a quick little video that kind of demonstrates the power of mental models, and it's just a fun way to think about this. There's a little bit of sound. I don't know if that'll come through. It doesn't really matter. It's just grunting. All right, so here we have like the classic situation, right? So I'm calling this the second wildebeest, the one who's still standing here? No? All right. So, lots of fun, interesting things there, right? So we're in these situations frequently, right? Where we, and I would say we're all here because we have an understanding kind of the situation in the Red Cedar watershed. And it's not like we don't all share the exact same mental models, but we have a sense that maybe there are things that could be done better, more effectively. We have we have contributions to make to improving situations in the watershed. And we continuously interact with others who have a different view of that, a different mental model, right? And so we often serve as that first wildebeest, hoping to make that impact on the second one who learned. Hopefully we don't have to sacrifice ourselves to crocodiles to do that. But the second crocodile or second wildebeest then learned through that process, right? Built a mental model that's a better representation of reality, that's actually a crocodile, not a log. And then is faced with the dilemma of the third wildebeest, their recognition that the third wildebeest has a mental model that's not a good representation of reality, and what does it do, right? Does it let it sacrifice itself? Does it engage in some process to help to build a shared understanding of what's going on, right? And I think that's all of our role, right? One, developing our own kind of best representation of reality, and then also sharing that and helping develop that within other people, right? And again, hopefully, we don't get eaten by crocodiles in the process. Oops, I don't want to do that. We don't need to watch that again. All right, back to this. All right. So, we get into the kind of deeper into the systems thinking part here, but just as a summary of this first part, the problems that we face, which we could call wicked problems because they're dealing with complex situations and they're hard to deal with. Wicked problems result from the mismatch between how real world systems work and how we think they work, right? That mismatch is the core of what gets us into trouble, I would argue, in almost all situations. This is a quote from Derek Cabrera. He was involved in the Think Water project. He developed a bunch of this kind of theory around systems thinking and works through Cornell to continue this work. But to me, this is the core. And the question then is, what do we do about that, right? We know maybe we need to build new mental models, but how do we go about that, right? So, and I would argue the answer to that is systems thinking and improved thinking about things. So this is one way to think about it. We spend the vast majority of our time in kind of superficial level thinking, just out of purely energy conservation, brain power conservation, right? Of just relying on our mental models, paying attention to events, functioning on kind of a day-to-day basis. But if we recognize that the problems that we have are complex and we're not making as much progress on them as we want to, we need to recognize that we actually have to shift our thinking and our understanding of the world, which gets down to the bottom of the iceberg, that we have to kind of transform mental models, right? We need to shift how we understand the world. So that's what that's saying. So now we get into some of the details. So this little formula, not a mathematical formula, but kind of fun representation of this. M is equal to or it represents the mental model, so that's our understanding of the world. And we can say that mental models are built out of information plus thinking, right? And I want to make a distinction here between the information and mental models or knowledge. We often get in the situation where we misequate information and knowledge. Information is everywhere out in the world. I don't know how many times in my career I've heard someone say like, oh, they already know that because I handed them a pamphlet that had this information in it. Like, that's zero, right? They don't know that because they got information. They only know that if they took the information and incorporated it into their understanding of the world, and they do that through a process we call thinking, right? That's why mental model or knowledge is equal to information plus thinking. Information by itself doesn't do anything. There's a unending information out in the world. Our role, again, as those folks who are the second wildebeest, is to help people to build that, one, for us to build that knowledge, but also to help others to build that knowledge through a structured process of thinking, right? Not just providing information. That's kind of I would say that's a disservice in a lot of ways, because we're just contributing to a mess of information out there, right? Hopefully that resonates a little bit and makes sense. So thinking is the core of this. This is Derek Cabrera's work. There are actually a set of patterns or rules around thinking that we call DSRP, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about those. But DSRP stands for distinctions, systems, relationships, and perspectives. And these are the kind of common patterns, thought patterns that we use to build knowledge with information. One thing I'll say about this, when I introduce systems thinking to folks, a lot of times the first reaction is kind of like, oh yeah, that's nice, there are 4 patterns. I don't get how interesting or powerful that is, and I completely understand. We'll get to play with these a little bit, but to give you a sense, there are a few folks in this room. Let's see, Chase and Buzz, I saw earlier. There are a few other folks who I've spent, we spent weeks together actually diving into systems thinking as a part of a program called Thinkwater School. And so I'm just gonna kind of scratch the surface of this and kind of recognize that a lot of times the first time you see it is kind of like, yep, that's fine, whatever. It'll maybe be interesting at some point. But hopefully you can kind of see the power of it as we move along here. All right, so again, DSRP, as the abbreviation, these are the ways that information is structured or made into knowledge. I'm gonna walk through these rules a little bit, and then we're gonna spend the rest of the time actually playing with these. So, distinctions rule, I'm gonna use my water bottle as a little demonstration here. So, distinctions rule says that any idea or thing can be distinguished from everything else, right? So, a distinction, this is my water bottle, right? So, it's not Kate's water bottle, it's not anybody else's water bottle, it's not my, metal water bottle, it's this one, right? So that's a distinction. Nothing else in the world is this thing. So that's what a distinction says. Systems rule, or systems pattern says that anything can be broken down into parts or lumped into wholes, right? So if we look at this water bottle, there are a whole bunch of parts to it, right? So it's got a cap, it's got a plastic outer area, it's got an internal cavity that's filled with air and water right now, it's got stickers. But then you can break those down further, right? So the plastic is made out of a bunch of molecules from petroleum. The air that's in there is made up of oxygen and nitrogen, and you can break those down, right? You can continue to kind of drill down into parts. You can also lump this into wholes, right? So this water bottle is part of we'll just say a water bottle system, right? There's a whole bunch of different kinds of water bottles. It's also part of a manufacturing system. It's part of a marketing system. It's part of a hydration system, all kinds of things, right? So with any idea, you can go up and down. There are parts to it, there are holes to it. That's the systems rule. Relationship rule is that this one thing can be related to anything else through relationships, right? So what's the relationship between this water bottle and this presentation? Obviously right now it's a prop, but the other is that it's a hydration, make sure I can continue to talk. But it's also related to Kate's water bottle by function. It's related to climate change by the materials and process that it's used, right? So you can build relationships between any things. I will say that's probably in some ways the most powerful rule, and we'll spend some time there. And then finally, the perspectives rule, which says that everything is viewed from a particular perspective, and that if you change the perspective, you change what's seen or considered, right? So perspectives are incredibly powerful. So this water bottle, from my perspective, is about water delivery. But if you think about it from a marketer's perspective, there might be a little bit of water delivery, but it's really about all kinds of other function, like how can I sell it? Is it pretty? Is it functional? Is it lightweight? All kinds of things. So you can take all kinds of different perspectives. From the river's perspective, it's a completely different thing, right? It's a source of microplastic, potentially, or it's a source of discharge from when it was made, right? So change the perspective, you change what's seen. All right, so 4 rules, again, super simple, but have incredible power, right? So we're gonna start playing with these now. So you all have paper in front of you. we're going to do some mapping. Before we get into that, I want to give you a little bit of kind of nomenclature, I guess, ways to do this. So the first one is that a box, so if you just draw a blank box on your paper for now, that is what we call a distinction, right? So that can be labeled as whatever, but a square box is a distinction. Use the little paper to start with. Yeah, so you should each have a couple of pieces of small paper. So draw a box on there, make that a distinction. If you put small boxes underneath it, that's what we'd call parts of that whole, right? Does that make sense? So draw a couple of little boxes underneath that. Those are parts. You could also draw a box above the box that I labeled distinction, and that could be a larger system, but we'll just leave that for right now. But you have distinctions, you have parts, and once you do that, you have a system of some sort, right? You have a whole that you call distinction, you have parts, right? That's the system. You can make another distinction, you can draw relationships. We represent relationships with lines. So if you draw another box, draw a line across to the other one, that's how we would label a relation or a relationship. And you can actually label those, which we'll get into. But a line represents relationships, and then a little eyeball, or however you want to represent it with a line to distinction is the perspective, right? So I'm just giving you kind of a structure to do some mapping, right? So questions on that? Is that making sense? Again, super simple. All right. So now we're going to start mapping. Now you're going to become systems thinkers if you aren't already. All right, so I want you to draw a new box. Can be same sheet of paper. I want you to draw a box, and I want you to label that box peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And then I want you to put 3 parts underneath it. And I want you to label those 3 parts. This isn't even a trick process. It really is this simple, right? So the question I'm asking you is, what are the 3 parts of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? Label those in those boxes. I'll give you like 30 seconds to do that. I'll give you. Most likely you got them already. All right. So you got those labeled out. Now I want you to do one other thing, is to identify the perspective from which you are mapping that peanut butter and jelly sandwich. How would you identify or describe the perspective? Right? So you've got your first map. We're going to stop there for a second. You've nailed it perfectly so far. I'm very confident. I'm just going to show you kind of a representation of this. This is just in a software program called Plectica. But I'm guessing your map looks something like this, right? So you have peanut butter and jelly sandwich. There are 3 parts to that. Most likely you picked out bread, peanut butter, and jelly as your 3 parts to a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And how many of you labeled the perspective as the eater or some similar kind of perspective? Most of you, right? Other perspectives? Anybody else pick something else? Okay, interesting one, the maker, right? So the peanut butter and jelly sandwich from the eater's perspective and the maker's perspective are essentially the same, right? And if you're a really good peanut butter and jelly maker, and in my case, if I'm a really good dad, I know that I have 3 different perspectives on a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in my house, and I actually tailor the contents of the peanut butter and jelly sandwich to the perspective of the eaters, right? Sometimes I don't really care. I just, make it from my own perspective. But that's another perspective of maker. And if you can match the eater perspective and the maker perspective, you've reached like perfection there, right? Anybody label anything else? What was that? Evil good. Okay. Yep. So kind of a tasty something, but maybe not necessarily good for you. Okay. Okay. Yep. Energy, yep. So you could have perspectives around food, energy, abstraction, yep. So it's just this idea of peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So we can have a bunch of different perspectives, and you could actually begin to map these out of like, we'll take the evil good kind of one, and you could kind of dive down into the details of why, right? Of like tastiness, the peanut butter, you would probably break that down into hydrogenated oils, sugar, you know, you could dive down into those ingredients more. I want you to think about it from one other perspective that you see just on the edge of the screen as the dishwasher. Think about it as the dishwasher. What are the parts of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to a dishwasher? It probably, probably something like this, right? To the dishwasher, the sandwich doesn't really matter that much. It's about the utensils that are used and the things that they have to wash, right? So again, super simple example gets at the kind of power of perspective, right? Of take a different perspective on the same thing, and you change what you're seeing, and you begin to relate these together. All right, so then next thing I want you to do is draw another box and do what you just saw on the screen. Label that new box as agriculture and draw a relationship between peanut butter jelly sandwich and agriculture, and think about the relationships between those two things. And for those of you that are like already digging into the details, you could potentially have parts of agriculture that relate to the parts of peanut butter and jelly sandwich too, right? Or you could talk generally about the relationship between agriculture and peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? So play with that for a little bit. Think about a couple of relationships between agriculture and peanut butter and jelly sandwich, then we'll dive into those. All right, so most likely you've got those pretty well. It probably is looking something like this. Right, so this relationship between peanut butter and jelly sandwich and agriculture is that agriculture provides or is the source of the products for peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? You could talk about, in this one I went into a little bit more detail, right? So you could break that down. Grain is being used for the bread. There are also grains that are used to produce the oils that are used in peanut butter. Fruit agriculture is used to produce jelly, on and on, right? You could add the sugar part of it, right? So your maps look something like that, right? Then you'll probably have different parts. You could, take this another step and dive into the types of agriculture, the practices that are used, to think about those kind of wherever you want to go, right? Is this making sense from a mapping standpoint generally? So you're all systems thinkers already, which is awesome, but we're going to start getting a little bit more complex, dive into something here that'll kind of directly play into this afternoon. So what we're going to do with the next one is I want you to do just a little bit of mapping on your own, and then we're going to actually share maps and kind of try to develop a collective map, probably at the table level, which is why you have the big sheets of paper. So we're going to start with the individual map. We'll develop that. You'll kind of work on that, and then we'll talk about that a little bit, and then collectively we'll start to build out a kind of shared understanding of something, right? So that's what the big pieces of paper are for. So we're going to start here, though. I'm going to give you maybe 5 minutes to work on this one. And what I want you to think about is mapping a river, and think about the parts of that river. Start thinking about maybe relationships within those parts. Think about the perspective from which you're viewing that. Are there larger systems that a river is part of that you could identify? and go wherever you want with that. And then what we're gonna, we'll share that kind of within tables after a few minutes. And then I'm gonna ask you to think about a relationship to something, and then we'll dive into that, and then we'll do the kind of group exercise, right? So for now, just start with your river map. So we give you like 5 minutes to do that. Looks like a lot of folks are still diligently working, which is awesome. So I'll give you another minute or so. All right, looks like most of us are getting close to wrapping up. So what I encourage you to do now is just a couple minutes, share your map with another person next to you. So if you're at a table by yourself, maybe jump over to another table where you can share. But just compare your maps, kind of talk through what's similar, what's different. I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. All right, we'll bring you all back for a little bit here. So just point out a couple of things. I don't know if you thought about perspective in there, but encourage you also to think about the perspective from which you mapped. This is a map that I just started playing with. Probably looks similar to some of what you had. I probably did a few extra parts because I had a little bit more time to think about it, but and then started building relationships. So hopefully you kind of started getting into some of those things. But I want to point out a couple of things. One is you now have in your table. It was awesome to hear the conversation just immediately start up. The reason for that is you had a shared, essentially vocabulary to talk about something. You're all doing kind of the same thing, right? Using the same structure. So that initiated the conversation. You could compare things directly, right? You're all kind of representing a river in the same way. So one kind of key point about building shared knowledge and understanding is having a shared vocabulary and process is important. The second one is hopefully you got into seeing multiple maps. You probably noted a lot of similarities, but you also noted some differences that people identified. And those were either potentially aha moments of like, oh yeah, I could have included that in my map too. I get how that's part of it. And potentially also you heard something and you're like, what in the world are you talking about? Like, where did that come from? How is that? And that's a good reaction. Hopefully it wasn't like, nope, that can't be part of a river, right? It should be that curiosity of like, oh, what is it that you're thinking about here? How do you think of that as part of a river or a relationship, whatever it might be? That's that kind of humility and curiosity of developing shared learning, right? So anyway, you've started down that process. You've developed a more complex map. Next thing I want you to do, again, return to your own mapping for a little bit. And I want you to do this relationship because it's maple syrup season. Unfortunately, I don't think John Sipple is here. Is he? Oh, there he is. All right, good. I'm glad I used this example then. This is John's maple syrup. So anyway, I want you to think about the relationship between a river and maple syrup and start to identify kind of the relationships that exist. And those relationships, again, could be broadly, directly between maple syrup and the river, or it could be maybe parts of what we would think about as maple syrup or land uses related to maple syrup and aspects, parts of your river, right? So you could draw relationships at multiple kind of scales. So I want you to work on that for a couple of minutes. And then what we're going to do is work on a shared map at your table, including all these things, right? All right, so have at it. Looks like we're getting some ideas down. I'll give you another 30 seconds and then shift to large group. All right, so now your grand challenge for the morning, at least. Working together at your table, what I'll ask you to do is use the big sheet of paper to capture this map collectively, parts of a river, and then if you map some systems that rivers are part of, however you want to do that, capture that, and then that relationship between the river or a river and maple syrup. So capture that on your big map collectively. If you have like a really full table, I think there are 2 pieces of large paper on each table. You can split that up if you want to, or you can work collectively in one group, however you want to. And if anybody has a subgroup they want to move up to this table, you can do that too. But have at it. I'll give you about maybe 8 minutes, 7-8 minutes to work on that collective map to demonstrate your shared understanding. So make sure you identify a drawer so that you just don't talk. Someone's got to get ideas on paper.
chance I get distracted, feel free to. I'll jump around.
All right, we're still doing some good mapping, so I'll give you another minute or two to get into a little bit more depth. Thank you. All right. I hate to interrupt the conversations, but we'll come back together here. All right. So, what I'd like to do is just dive in a little bit into maybe some of the insights of your discussions. I'm particularly interested, I mean, I could talk about maple syrup forever, but I'm particularly interested about your identification of relationships between maple syrup and your river that you talked about within your group. So Dan and Tina have mics, I think, so if anybody's willing to share just some of the kind of main things that came out of your mapping, particularly in the kind of relationship side of things, but if there was, you know, some other huge aha moment about something that you include in your map, you're welcome to share that as well. But anybody willing to share, or who is willing to share, just kick us off? Paul? Yeah. Well, yeah. We'll go the farthest way, so.
Our table, quite a diverse table. We've got some biologists, we've got some fishermen, we have an engineer, so we looked at it from multiple aspects. But the relationship between them, we have groundwater infiltration from the maple forest, from the tree farm or from the woods. The river creating the topography and the soils, or helping to create the soils, and so those were the main relationships.
Awesome. Yeah. So that relationship between tree cover, maple syrup coming from maple forest, tree cover infiltration, and then historically maybe more so, but potentially contemporary to the soil development contour from the river. So awesome. Yeah, those are great relationships. Another one right here.
So we talked about different things you would put on your pancakes.
Yeah, nice.
And maple syrup is one, corn syrup is another. If you stick with maple syrup, you got a stable environment that's doing everything that these guys said. If you're doing corn syrup, because you're a cheapskate and you don't know any better.
Bad taste. Yeah.
I make maple syrup too. You're going to have you're going to have your corn syrup, but you're going to take all the horrible things that go into making corn syrup, and that's one. What else do we have there? So that's one.
That's an awesome one. Yeah, that choice between products of maple syrup.
And climate. And climate is a part of whether you can make syrup or not. We've had years where we've made none at all, and we've had years where we made 50 gallons.
Yep. Yeah, and then I would say maybe that relationship between carbon sequestration of maple trees versus some other thing, right? So good. Yep, great connections, good relationships. Maybe a couple more here in the middle. Oh, I'll do, yeah. We'll go this one and then there. Yeah.
I got this one, Tina.
It's a microphone. So we had the same thing. You know, we had the watershed. It's a good land use, trees on the land. Instead of removing all the trees for cropland, we're losing, I think, in our world here, more and more of our woods all the time. And then the water quality, the benefit of like the carbon, keeping the carbon sequestered or whatever it's called. So, and then I think if you have high nitrate water table, high nitrate or PFAS, when that gets taken up by that tree, you know, we want to avoid that because that get carried into the maple syrup? I don't know. But I've never thought about it till this morning. Now it sounds disturbing, so maybe I won't think about that anymore. So anyway, too complicated.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting one. We don't know a whole lot about that one actually, but it's an area of research right now of what's the relationship between groundwater and maple syrup is an interesting one. So yeah, good. And one more here.
Okay, so am I on?
Yeah.
One of the maybe not so obvious connections we made was the sand from the river banks to make the glass to bottle the syrup.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also, off on a tangent, kind of ended up with discussing the difference between land fish and water fish, which didn't work out. But yeah, the glass and the sand for the container that went into a thing of manufacturing and where that comes from and the power supply that went into making the glass. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
we went with it.
Yeah, cool relationship, interesting relationship to explore. We got one more? Yeah, all right.
We haven't talked yet about the fuel we need to use to heat the maple juice to turn it into syrup.
Yep.
Is it wood? Is it gasoline? Is it?
Yep.
Yeah.
So it could be some other connections there. So yeah, those are awesome. Explored a lot of things. My hope is point out a couple of maybe things to reflect on a little bit as we start to wrap up here. But one is, again, you're developing that kind of shared knowledge. You developed a shared knowledge at your table. You probably didn't, there are probably things at your table still that you didn't get all the way there, right? There's still some pieces like, well, do I agree with that? Do I not agree with that? Kind of how does that fit in? And so there's still some, maybe things you just left off the map because you didn't want to, duke it out at this point yet, right? But this is kind of the start of that process of building shared understanding. The maps that you made represent a mental model, right? This is your representation of the reality of what I asked you to map. So you kind of built a shared mental model, whether that's fully kind of ingrained in all of your table mates. You might not be there yet, but that's the base of kind of shifting other people's understanding, right? So you've kind of laid out the potential to change someone else's mental model. Basically and I'm sure this happened at your table, someone saying like, I've never thought about that before and how that's part of this or related to that. That was a learning moment, right? So that's that feedback process of like, oh yeah, that mental model makes sense and I haven't really thought about it before. And so you're engaging in that process of learning. So two things happening there, your own individual learning and then the beginning process of shared understanding, right? The other piece I'll kind of emphasize, which I just touched on a little, is that this question comes up a lot of like, well, what if there's one person or a group or someone who basically refuses to believe this, even though this seems like a pretty good representation of what's going on. And that happens. Like there's a lot of it, right? And there's kind of two responses to it. One is the just hitting them over the head of like you're wrong obviously isn't going to get anywhere, right? My mental model's right, yours is wrong. There's no process there. We have to kind of build the process that we did together here with the additional people, like get them in a space where they can begin to map out what they're actually thinking and comparing that to others, taking others' perspectives, right? Which is what I would say is maybe the most powerful thing about systems thinking and is also the most difficult, right? Because you're all here, I'll say, you're the easy crowd, right? You're already engaged in this, you're interested in it. The person on the street, how do we get them to map out the Red Cedar watershed? So it gets a little bit harder, right? But I think that's again our work. That's the work of the second wildebeest, right? Of like, this is a helpful understanding of the world. How do we engage others in doing that? It can't just be, I'm sending out a pamphlet, I'm telling them they're wrong. Neither of those is going to work. We have to engage them in some process where we're building shared understanding, right? So just to emphasize that. Some of what we're going to be doing this afternoon is also exactly that, right? We're in the breakout rooms, we'll be focused on topics. You're going to be kind of sharing your perspectives on things, helping to build that shared knowledge around those topics and things that potentially could move forward. So I think that's all I'll say about that for right now. I'm not going to show you my map because the point was for you to kind of develop that and play with it and get a sense of how it plays out. So couple of things to wrap up. One is you've all kind of, the set of questions that's on the screen, I think is super useful as a starting point when you engage in any conversation. So these are just DSRP questions, right? Questions broken down by those 4 patterns. I basically, in a sense, asked you these questions as you were mapping, and you kind of asked yourself these questions as you were going through. You're not going to be able to map in every situation, right? You're not going to, be in a public meeting and say like, oh, hold on for a second, I need to pull out my map and we're going to go through this. Like that's not going to happen. But these questions can help to frame a conversation to help you think about things and to help others think about things in different ways. And you might have to word them, depending on the audience a little bit differently. Of these, I think the most powerful question in there, which is if you think about your last half hour, 40 minutes of mapping, where you spent the most energy, is on that relationship piece. And so that's often the most powerful question is like, well, what is the relationship between this and this other thing that, I'm thinking about? And so that often prompts a lot of questions, a lot of reflection, a lot of discussion. So anyway, these are questions that we can use in kind of any setting. I encourage these questions kind of on a daily basis. Like pick one of these out. The best practice that you can do for systems thinking is take 30 seconds out of every day or a minute and ask yourself one of these questions, which can be like, I'm standing in this room and I notice someone in a green sweatshirt. I wonder what the relationship is between that person and this, right? And like think through that a little bit. Or I see this dog on the street. Why is it that I think it's a dog? Why have I made that distinction? To actually kind of stop or interrupt the power of your mental models for a little bit, because they're just continuously filtering information. So these are questions that you can practice with. All right, and with that, again, just to reflect on kind of what we did with systems thinking and with mapping, this opportunity to kind of reflect on your own thinking, potentially improve your thinking about thinking processes using those rules. We probably shifted your understanding, improved your understanding a little bit of any of those things that we mapped, probably even peanut butter jelly sandwich, probably think about it a little bit differently now. And then we just started to think about how do we use these tools to improve education, communication, how do we build shared understanding, shared mental models. So again, I hope, hopefully a couple of you are interested, like fully jumping into the systems thinking nerd clubs. That would be awesome. But regardless, for the rest of you, hopefully you have there's a little bit there, piqued your interest a little bit. You continue to play with these ideas. As we move into the rest of the session, you're kind of using these tools to reflect on what's being shared, to ask questions, to dig deeper into topics, to engage your neighbors in these conversations, right? So with that, we're basically out of time, but if there's any we have a couple minutes for questions.
We got 5 minutes for questions.
Yeah. Anything, yeah. Yeah, Think Water is gone, unfortunately. Cabrera's, if you go to Cabrera Research Lab, we'll get you into a lot more detail. They're actually doing podcasts that are a good way to do things. They're running a certificate program through Cornell, and generally just continue to produce a lot of content. The mapping software, that is called Plectica, so it's just plectica.com. That you can start with a free trial and do some maps if you want to play with things, and then there's a paid subscription overall once you get into it. The relationship between Cabrera Lab and Plectica is that Cabrera has basically developed Plectica as part of Think Water, although earlier on, and then it got bought out by a venture firm or something. I can't remember the history of it, but anyway, it's a separate thing, but based on the same concepts. But thank you for that. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. You got a couple at your table, it sounds like. Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is, are there systems thinking workshops? Anybody know of anything happening right now? We're in a lull, I would say. We did a lot with Think Water. We ran Think Water School and Think Water Fellows. We have a couple of Think Water, or at least one Think Water Fellow here, Chase. Maybe a couple others, but we're in a, I hesitate to say this, but I'm going to say it just because it's tough. We're in a bit of a dark period of kind of systems thinking work happening at the organizational level. So if there's interest, I'd love to have a conversation and see what might be possible. So nothing that I know of, but hopefully. So I would say Cabrera's are the best source right now, kind of happening nationally.
One more question over here.
Yep.
Could you, in really short, describe the difference when you chose river and then maple syrup?
Yeah.
We would have had a different conversation if you said red cedar river and maple syrup, or can you describe why you would, in what situation would you use a broad versus pretty specific?
Yeah, that's a good question. Why a broad category versus a specific one? I think I chose the broad category just to kind of generalize the conversation and let everybody kind of engage at their own knowledge level, versus if you get specific, there's a lot of value in that, right? And in a sense, the intent of the conference is to develop a shared understanding of the Red Cedar watershed, and diving into some of the specifics. So it would be, if you're looking at specific action, it's helpful to have the specifics of Red Cedar watershed, say. But it might be intimidating for a newcomer to start of like, I know I just moved here, I don't know that much, or I only see this little part of it. So maybe that would be a distinction I would make. But I would say to get to action, in some cases it's more helpful to be specific and localized in there. Yeah, right. Yeah, the point was about kind of ground rules in the discussion of like trying to encourage people to open up and think. And so hopefully the structure encourages that, but you can still get people, who don't want to play in a sense, but yeah.
All right, we are out of time. We're going to go on a 15-minute break here. How about a hand for Jeremy? And
thank you very much. Yep.
And as we have the conversations this afternoon, think about filling in those boxes. We just did a river and maple syrup. What else can you put in those boxes? Relationship between a lake and a farm. Relationship between a consumer and a farmer. Relationship between a politician and somebody who lives on the lakes with regard to water quality. All those kinds of things come into play. So hopefully we'll get a chance to explore some of that in the conversations. So in 15 minutes, our morning breakout sessions will be happening. Those are just kind of talk at you sessions. This afternoon we'll have the conversation sessions, but yeah, so look through your program and find a good place to go. We'll start those at 10:15. Thank you.